Welcome to Insights into Success. We're with your host Paul Dodds. We hope to educate, inspire and motivate you to achieve your own personal success. We talk to guests from all around the world from a variety of walks of life to hear the realities of their own journey to success. What challenges have they faced? How have they coped with failure? And what have been the keys or will be the keys to their own success? In our Read to Succeed interviews, we talk books that have inspired our guests, and for some, they share their secrets to marketing success. Join us as we give you insights into success. Welcome to Insights into Success, and welcome back to Jonathan, who has been on before, but we got so engrossed talking about your journey, we forgot to talk about eSports. we've had to get you back, Jonathan. So good to see you again. Good to see that you're still looking healthy and not aged 20 years from this short experience with eSports. So, yeah, good to have you back on board.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's great to be here. You know, might not have externally aged, but definitely internally, I feel like it's been a bit of a whirlwind. It's one of those funny situations where you feel like at the same time, simultaneously, it's been a second, but it's also been 10 years. And so the last 6 months, I guess, or even I think it's about 10 months now, have just flown by.
And tell us, what have you been doing in that time? What's been the things that you've been achieving?
So when I started in October 21, and for those who are listening who haven't followed the eSports journey to date, I'll sort of start with a bit of history. So the organization was established in 2015 by a group of board members who essentially were the ones who had the vision, and they said, you know, gaming is gaming and esports is this interesting thing that's kind of starting to really boom. But what does the future of esports look like specifically for New Zealand? And that's where the idea of, hey, let's become or attempt to fill that need to be a regulatory body for esports as an NSO, which is a national sporting organization. So in the same way that New Zealand football or New Zealand rugby or basketball New Zealand, or, you know, there needs to be something like that for New Zealand. Yeah. So they really started out as a dream in 2015, and they pushed that agenda and that goal all the way through until early 2020, when they were officially recognized by the New Zealand government, Sport New Zealand, that esports is a sport, and the NZESF, or New Zealand Esports, is the organization. We are the one. And so with that status, we earned a lot of responsibility, and we had to quickly find a strong direction to go in. I joined the organization in October 2021. So between those two dates, the organization was really trying to figure out its direction and strategy. And that's sort of what my initial focus was. And so I can comfortably say now, since I've started, the NZESF have a very clear strategy. We have very clear core values. We know what we're here for. We know exactly what we do and what we don't do. And we've started some really cool projects along the way. So we now have things like a talent registry, because it's alongside of esports, there's not just the players. You've got all of the support systems attached to it. So you've got your coaching, your commentators or your casters, all of the production, the observers. There's a whole industry there. And so we've got things like the talent registry, where members can go and join up on our website and sign up to learn how to be a caster or a commentator. They can learn how to be a coach. They can get opportunities to work in the industry. University of Waikato have released their minor in esports, so you can now go and get a minor in esports at university.
Really? It sounds appealing.
And as well as NZMA and UB, a few other educational schools have programs in esports, learning about the industry, what it's like, you know, behind the scenes. So we've got that aspect of things. We've got volunteer frameworks all in place now, so people can really get involved with confidence. We've started to build out our education framework, and so, you know, one of my backgrounds obviously in education, and one of my concerns in esports is, you know, these players are coming in at 16, 17, 18, wanting to pursue a career in esports at sometimes the peril of their academic studies or the university. And so we really wanted to build a framework around how we can support athletes who choose to go into the esports world so that they can continue their studies all the way through. And so we've partnered with a few learning providers so that we've got access to internationally recognized qualifications that they can study while they're playing anywhere in the world, and come back and after their careers transition into sort of high value tech careers or creative careers, whatever their interests are in. So we've sort of built that whole process out. High performance sport, the E-Blacks, our national team, Commonwealth Games coming up in August. We're firing on all cylinders, so there's lots of stuff going on.
Wow, it sounds amazing, but it sounds like huge amount of work.
It is. It absolutely is, but it's incredibly rewarding as well, because I think what we're doing is we're pioneering what esports means at a country level, and we're doing amazing stuff for the industry. You know, even right now, there's problems that we're tackling where we have thousands of kids every weekend playing esports in schools. But, you know, are the people who are supervising these kids, you know, especially minors under the age of 16, have they had police background checks? Where is their privacy? Where is the data going once it's entered online for these tournaments? A lot of that stuff's still unregulated in the market, and so we've got lots of issues still left to tackle. But every time we solve one of these issues, we're affecting, you know, so many Kiwis now and to come, that it makes all of the work really worth it.
So just taking a step back, you know, as you're talking, I'm kind of thinking about the achievement of it actually being recognised as a sport, and how do you think they managed to do that? What was the key? Because that's a remarkable achievement. Because I'd imagine that, you know, there'll be a lot of pushback on that. You know, the principle of accepting it as a sport.
Yeah, no, I don't know the full history because I wasn't part of the organization at the time, but I can give you kind of, you know, the abridged version of what I've sort of heard to date. So you're absolutely right. There are a lot of traditional thinkers in the places of power that make these decisions, and there was a lot of pushback. One of the major contributing factors was COVID. COVID hit and sport stopped, and so did sport revenue, except for esports. And because esports sort of persevered on, it became, I think, really obvious at that point of time for those traditional thinkers where the participation really was. And so COVID actually, you know, while overall, you know, a really difficult experience, I think was probably a positive for esports in New Zealand, in the fact that we were able to, we were able to connect, or kids were able to connect with each other. Athletes were able to play and get better, and I think the statistic is 70% of gamers used gaming during the pandemic. 77% of New Zealanders used gaming during the pandemic to better their mental health. And so it was a really pivotal thing for a lot of people when they're locked in their houses. And I think that drove the agenda really well. But the primary decision was just around helping people understand exactly what esports is, and that it's a sport. And there's a lot of, you know, traditionalist thinkers out there, and we get this question all the time. And it's one of my least favorite questions from the media. As always, you know, is esports a sport? You're sitting down, what are you doing? And I think that when you have a conversation about it, it doesn't take very much to convince people, like, yeah, it absolutely is. Because even though it's not a display of cardiovascular endurance or muscular strength, you know, the camaraderie, the teamwork, the resilience, all of those, you know, I could list off a million different characteristics of sport, and they relate to esports as well. There's mind-muscle connections, and you need insane reaction speeds to be any good, and you need insane, you know, there's all of these physical attributes to it. You know, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily, while we are recognized as a sport, we're also esports, and we're our own thing. And so although we are different and we share a lot of things, there's also a lot of things that are really unique about it. And so I'm really glad that the New Zealand government and Sport New Zealand acknowledged that, and that they sort of took the steps to be one of the leaders in the world to really bring this on as a sport and help us develop it at this early stage.
And so outside of New Zealand, what other countries recognise it as a sport?
I don't have a whole list, but there's a couple through Asia, a couple through sort of the Middle East. We're one of the first, you could probably say, Western democratic countries to recognize it as a sport. So Australia is not there yet. US isn't there yet. UK, as far as I'm aware, they're not there yet. Or England, but they're all sort of pushing down that same agenda. So we're part of maybe 112 different member federations across the world. And so they're the countries who have a version of us. And we're probably one of 30 globally recognized as a sport.
And do you think going forward that you're likely to, your experience here in doing this, do you think you'd be called upon to help in other countries to replicate what you're achieving here?
I think so. I mean, already we're seeing it's a very collaborative community, and a lot of it's bootstrapped and grassroots. And so we always look to each other to see, best practices, what we're doing well, and how we can help lift each other up. I've been grateful enough and thankful enough to hear that some people look to what we're doing already as an example of best practice, or how we're raising the standard up. And some of that will be, for example, around media with the E-Blacks, how we did a big E-Blacks qualifier, was on Sky Sport. We got these big broadcasts around it, and we're really raising the profile of a national esports team, which in the esports world is fairly unique. Usually teams are comprised of individuals from across the region. So you might have a couple of Australians, a couple of New Zealanders, and they might have a team and they represent Oceania. Whereas because we're we're pioneering what it means to represent New Zealand as a nation, especially at events like the Commonwealth Esports Championships or the Olympics or whatever else is out down the track. And so, it's nice to know that we are already at some degree a role model, but there's a degree of pressure with that as well, because every single thing that we create, we know that we've got lots of eyeballs watching us.
And do you think, is there a possibility by doing this, being an early adopter, that you can get a jump on other countries and we can lead the way in terms of being one of the top esports countries?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we're doing it, because I feel like I watched a video the other day, came up on my Facebook feed really serendipitously, and I kind of had one of those eureka moments. It was a video of the 1920 men's freestyle swimming race. And then next on one half of the screen, and the other half of the screen was the 2020 freestyle men's Olympic race that's just been. So 100 years in between it. And the gun goes off at the exact same time. All the swimmers enter the pool, and then slowly you see the 2020 races just getting further and further and further ahead of the 1920s. And by the end of the race, they were a lap and a half. Like, it wasn't even the worst competitor by far in the 2020 would have been a world record in 1920. And that's over 100 years.
Wow.
And when I was watching that, I was thinking, if you were in the crowd in that 1920 Olympics, you would have been watching those swimmers go, that's the peak of human physical performance.
Yeah.
And that's what we understood to be the best of the best of the best. And humans haven't evolved over 100 years, but you can see, like, physically, but you can see what the difference of that high performance training has made for them and how much they've improved. And to me, I was sitting there thinking, esports is in its infancy stages. We're toddlers at the moment, and we're in that stage right now where we look to the best esport athletes globally, and we think it is the peak of human mental performance. But really, we might not have even explored half of what we're capable of yet. And so for me, the exciting part is that if we put our high performance structures behind it, we work with High Performance Sport New Zealand, we're working with sleep scientists, nutritionists, or dietitians, sports psychologists. And if we really understand what high performance esports is, how do we make the most out of, how do we push the human brain to its cognitive peak? What we think is the best right now, we might not even be close, and we could potentially leapfrog that whole journey and start to be world leaders in the space. And that's what's incredibly exciting.
So for you, do you reflect on other sports in New Zealand and look at how they have evolved, and then looking to borrow their type of structures and implementing with what you're doing? Because when you're talking before, I was thinking, like, the whole feeder of high, student sportsmen into the whole thing, and then high performance, and that it sounds like trying to breed All Blacks.
Absolutely, we're trying to breed E-Blacks.
Yeah.
And it starts at grassroots, and there are a lot of things I think that we can learn from the sporting structures, because they've been at it for a really long time, and they've done it with fairly limited resources. We face all the same issues in esports as any other sport does, where they say, how can you ever be the best in the world in esports when we only have 5 million people? Well, the All Blacks are the best in the world, even though we've only got 5 million people. How do we replicate that? So we do look to them, and all sports in New Zealand, and what have they done well? Because we really are at those stages where we have the opportunity to really go, Yes, that works. No, that doesn't. We can pick and choose all the great things and put them into one program or framework.
Yeah.
But the other side to that story is that esports is so different. So there are only so many things that we can we can look to. And I can use an example like our regional sport structure. So we have a challenge, as does every sport. How do we increase participation? How do we get as many Kiwis doing esports as possible? And you can look at how rugby have done that with schools and clubs. But the interesting thing, I guess, in sports is everyone lives in the same place. You know, you grow up in school, you join a team, you play against local schools, you might travel once a year to compete at a national competition, and that's how you do sport.
Yeah.
Whereas when it comes to esports, you make friends online, and you're playing with someone in Hawke's Bay and Whangarei and Nelson all on the same team. And so those geographical boundaries don't really make a lot of sense. And when the boundaries don't make sense, all of a sudden local clubs start to, how does that whole structure work? How do you build everything into that system? So although some things are similar, and we do our best to take everything that's worked really, really well in sport, there are things that are just completely different. And so we're having to be creative and kind of build what that looks like for the first time, which is a blessing and a curse.
And how do you go for funding? Like, where does the money come from to help you, do all these initiatives?
Surprisingly, we don't really get much funding. So due to our NSO status, that was the real big funding push for us, because as soon as we're legally recognized as the same as New Zealand football, for example, theoretically, we're then able to go to grassroots, pub charities, Lion Foundation, all of the traditional sporting trusts that you'd think of, and apply for funding. And we have the ability to do that. Same with Sport New Zealand. They have $20 million aspirational fund that they might release that different sports can apply for funding for. And we do apply for funding for those. However, to date, we've been unsuccessful in securing anything through those channels, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to, even though they're recognized as a sport, do we believe that? Is it going to contribute to the physical well-being of New Zealanders? There's kind of still a lot of traditional thinkers in the space we haven't managed to convert yet. So we don't get a lot of funding for this. Primarily, we get most of our funding through the PAB as an NSO. So the way that it works as an NSO is whenever esports betting happens in New Zealand, those profits are then distributed from the TAB, regulated through the Department of Internal Affairs, into the designated NSO, who is us. And so we get a percentage of esports betting in the country, and that's what pretty much keeps us going, as well as sponsorships. So we're lucky enough to, and depending on when this is, you might have to edit this part out. But we're lucky enough to have, sponsors such as Chorus, who have come on board to help us run our national esports league, to to really push the message out to New Zealanders. And so a couple of commercial interests in New Zealand have helped us to date as well. But we're sort of still building up the value.
Yeah, I can imagine that for a lot of these charities, that they will, or the funding providers, I should say, they will think, well, you're not getting out and running around the grass. Don't really see that as being very healthy. You're sitting in front of a TV all day. I think we'll put the money into on those real sports.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what it is. And we have conversations, and I encourage all of these charities to let me have conversations with their boards around educating them around what esports is, because it takes 2 minutes to completely change the perception of what it is. And the way that I kind of describe that is there's a really distinct difference between gaming and esports. And in the same way that you might say during the summer, 3 million Kiwis go to the beach and swim, doesn't mean that we have 3 million competitive swimmers in New Zealand. Who's turning up at the pool at 6 a.m. to do the laps? Who's analyzing their stroke patterns? What does it mean to be an esports athlete? And that's where we come into the picture. So I'm saying that we're not promoting gaming as a recreational activity. We're promoting all the things that go along with it. And gaming happens to be the engagement vehicle. And people hate to hear it almost, but whether we like it or not, Kiwi kids are gaming. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of them every single day. Would you rather that they do that in a way that's unstructured and unguided, or with esports, we can teach them, hey, it's important that you get your sleep. It's important you play within moderation. It's important to take care of your eyes. Let me educate you about the chronic physical issues that happen when you're playing esports. It's obvious when you're playing rugby and you get spear tackled and your shoulder comes out, you have that acute injury. But when you're playing esports, you have wrist RSI issues and they sneak up on you. You've got back and posture issues and they aren't so obvious and in your face, and they happen over time. They can be more damaging. And so we can educate kids around, and parents and schools around all these issues. And it doesn't take very long for them to click on and go, you know what, this absolutely makes sense. We should be behind this. We should be encouraging it.
Yeah, and then the thing that strikes me too is that it doesn't have to be at the exclusion of other sports. Like say if you play rugby, you're unlikely to also go and play football. But you could be a top rugby player and also be a top esports person as well.
Absolutely. I mean, at the moment, we've just signed on Joshua King, JMK King, for eFootball. So he'll be our representative over in the Commonwealth Games, or Commonwealth Esports Championships in Birmingham. And he plays, he's a football player, Division 1 football player in his club. And so, he was with Wellington Phoenix, their E-League 2 years ago. And so it's absolutely this big crossover. And I think almost in the complete opposite direction, there's statistics that are still being sort of found, but in the States, I believe it was 20% of FIFA players started their love for the sport through the video game. And so, there's definitely something, you're playing with the players, you're learning the game, you're gaining that appreciation. And I have a kind of a personal story around that, where I think I played volleyball in school quite heavily. It is there, the volleyball. And and I had my coach, my team, and everything else. Went to nationals, did really well. I loved it. One of my best sports. And then as soon as I left my ecosystem of Whakatane and I moved to Auckland, I stopped competing. I stopped playing because my structure was gone. But I kept in touch with my friends through games and online. And then I actually ended up, because I was playing with my friends and I had that social circle, I thought, it'd be great to get back into volleyball again. I was passionate about it, but my social circle was all sort of the friends that I gamed with. And so I said, hey guys, come play volleyball. Let's go join a social league. Let's get out there. Let's do something, different. And half of our team have never played sports before in their lives, but they had the confidence to get out there onto the court because of the connections that we had built through gaming. And so I think that, not only is it not a direct competition, but it's actually incredibly complementary to encouraging kids to be active and be social, because at its heart, that's what we believe sport is. We believe sport's a social thing. It's about bonding. And this is a way that we can build confidence in kids to do that.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about the cross-pollination of skills that can be developed in esports and how that can translate to maybe other sports or other activities in society. And one that kind of strikes me or comes to my mind, and I'm interested to hear other examples you might have, is my son. He's not esports. He plays gaming, but one of the games he plays is car racing. So when we went down to Hampton Downs, he knew exactly about the lines to take. Also had a weight advantage, which helped. But nonetheless, he knew what he was doing and was very good. And so I attribute that pure and simply to his time on gaming.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we have motor racing across the country, or you've got examples worldwide of people who hone their skills, not through karting, or not through because they might not be able to afford it. There might be a financial barrier or some other barrier, but they hone it through sim racing, and they get so good that they can then almost jump into a real car and with very little practice, pick up on those skills and be top performers. And there are lots of cross skills depending on the title. So if you look at sim racing, I think that's one of the highest cross pollination in the fact that you can learn you can learn your tracks, you can learn the apex of the corners, you know exactly where to go, and all of those skills are very, very transferable. In something like basketball or football games, you learn the formations a lot better. You're not in the big death ball traveling around the field as a team as you are when you're sort of 5-6 years old. You know the value of passing and keeping a structure or building a screen or a block, and you're learning that stuff whether you know it or not, which would be a coach's dream for their whole
Yeah.
team to understand how a screen works in any sport. And
Yeah.
so that whole learning experience absolutely is created inside of esports. But I think the other thing that's kind of less talked about is the soft skills learned within esports that are transferable to the real world and their physical counterparts. So the experience of deafening silence after a heavy loss, and every, you'd
Right.
experience that as a team. The ability to sort of have self-responsibility, because you can lose in a game and you can go, no, it's my teammate's fault. They're
Yeah.
bad. I would have won without them. And I think we've all been there. But it's
Yeah.
one of the things you learn very quickly through esports is even if your team loses, you can always find something that you can improve on, and you can look
Right.
to improve your own game. And so you start to develop that self-responsibility. You start to stop shifting blame off yourself and onto others. We did a survey recently at the beginning of the year, and 94% of respondents, this was out to over 1,000 Kiwi gamers, said that they had learned valuable skills through esports that they were then able to apply to their real world lives. 94%, which is huge. And so I think all of those sort of smaller things, being able to deal with your emotions. You see the old stereotype of the gamer getting frustrated and smashing his controller or throwing it at the wall. The emotions people feel are absolutely real, and they do learn to deal with them. And that's what I think the power of esports is like, if we can do that in a school environment where a student's able to connect with their teacher and walk through their emotions in a way that's healthy, and they can then learn to control or deal with those emotions when they're in a professional setting or an interview, or a real life emergency response. All of those things kick in, and they learn them through esports. So even though you're sitting on a controller and you're in a virtual world, everything that's happening in your brain is so applicable and so transferable.
Yeah, it's interesting too, and I mean it's an unfortunate circumstance, but there is some lessons in it. Talking about the war in Ukraine and how wars have evolved, and now there's more and more technology now, and obviously with drones and that, and seeing that people that are into gaming and that are being recruited and now flying drones. So the skills that they've learnt on playing sports online, they've been able to transfer them. And I know in the American Armed Services and that too, even now they're recruiting people with that gaming background to control high-tech equipment. So that's just one example, I guess, of where it can translate to a career later on.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, and it is unfortunate, but I mean, from a recruiting perspective, why wouldn't you? These are people potentially who have got years and years and years of experience under their belt. I think people vastly underestimate what's going on inside of the brain of someone who's participating in esports at a high level, because they can do things that we can't even comprehend. And as someone who's kind of been in that space, there are people out there who are just cognitively on a whole nother level, and they've got reaction times better than fighter pilots. They become fighter pilots, as you mentioned. It's eventually just from merit of their ability, but being able to kind of make 200 to 300 decisions per minute. Imagine being able to pick a pixel on your screen right now and move your mouse to it within 0.05 of a second, within 50 milliseconds, and then be able to make another 3 or 4 decisions in that next second before your next action. This is happening over 30, 40-minute games every single time people are competing in high-level esports. And the fact that they can do this without error is just absolutely phenomenal. And that's just kind of one of the skill sets. It is unreal, but I can totally understand when you start to move away from the physical limitation of man into we now have these unarmed vehicles, or these things that we can control from far away. How do we make the best out of the performance? And it comes from that human to computer interface. And some people playing esports or gaming have been training for that for years and years and years, so I can see why.
And so tell me, like, just as you were talking before, the thing that keeps popping into my mind is it sounds exhausting. Like, after playing a 40-minute game, are they exhausted, or do they just get accustomed to it?
It's something you definitely get accustomed to. It's similar to you could say that in an opposite effect, when you're on social media, you start flicking through videos, you kind of turn your brain off. When you're watching TV, you kind of turn your brain off and relax. At least for me personally, in my old age, I can't play more than a couple of hours. Well, actually, I can't play Rob with more than an hour of competitive gaming without being completely worn out. But kids that are younger, their brains are much more powerful and adaptable, I guess, than we probably give them credit for. And so it's not unusual for some people to be performing at pretty high levels for 6 to 8 hours. But there are studies that show you start your performance starts to diminish after 4 to 5 hours of heavy focus. And so that's why, for some reason, we'd never let our kids eat ice cream until they throw up, but some parents will let them play games until they pass out. And helping people understand that that's not productive and that it's bad and everything else in an esports context is kind of what we strive to do.
Yeah. I can't imagine it could be good for their eyes if you're staring at a screen for those many hours just constantly. I can't imagine that would be good.
No, we promote 20-20-20. Your optometrist might have told you about. So every 20 minutes, you look at something at least 20 meters away for 20 seconds. And so whether or not you set an alarm on your phone or you've got an app on your computer that just reminds you after every game, sometimes depending on the game you're playing, it's good to just have that break for your eyes and your body too. You should be getting up and stretching. You've got, making sure your ergonomics are all okay. Those are all things that we try and teach through esports because they become really important. We have tremendously talented athletes who didn't have those structures in place, who are burning out at the age of 21, 22, and it's just not sustainable. We'd love for those athletes, and we know of them. There are examples of them in the industry now who have looked after themselves, who are in their early 30s and still performing, fantastically. And so we want to build those values in the whole time. But if it's abused, it can be absolutely detrimental.
So, okay, if you're in your early 30s in esports, I'm imagining you're probably regarded as an old man or an old woman, wouldn't you?
Dinosaur, absolute fossil.
So I guess like the industry's evolving, but at this stage, where do you think, have you got a gut feeling of where do you think the average age is for peaking?
I wouldn't be surprised if it got quite young. When I say quite young, I probably mean 19 to 20. I don't think it's going to get into your 14, 15-year-olds are going to be, I think at a mechanical level, and when I say mechanical, the mind-muscle connection and how quickly they can focus on different things is very impressive at that young age. And if you've ever seen like a Fortnite or a Minecraft building video and they're standing there and all of a sudden they've got a whole structure around them, they've input, maybe 70 to 80 actions in half a minute, in 30 seconds. And they can, wall here, wall there, edit window, wall here, wall top, roof, stairs, they can do all that before you can blink. So I think at that age, you start to get a lot of that mechanical skill. But in terms of high level esports performance, you do need, it's very important to have that degree of communication, having the experience, the emotional resilience are all things that contribute quite a lot in our research towards what it means to be a high level esport athlete. And so I'd be surprised if people were able to gain that meaningful experience before kind of the ages of 19, 20, 21, where they're able to mix those two things of peak mechanical performance and then enough experience under their belt to really utilize it. So I'd say around that age group, you might start to see some really peak players.
Okay, so talking career prospects, starting, I guess, with a player themselves, what's the future for them after esports? Where could they go? And I know we touched on a little bit before, but I'm just interested for you to maybe sort of expand on where you think it can lead to after they retire or, stop being a competitive sports person.
Yeah, so I think there's two, before we get into that sort of discussion, it's important to note out there for any of the parents listening and their children, I want to be an esports athlete, is that doesn't have to be the goal. Statistically, a very, very small amount of people will ever become an All Black. but that
Right.
doesn't mean you shouldn't play rugby. Like there are lots and lots and lots of really positive reasons why kids and everyone should really engage in esports outside of the dream of becoming Messi or Ronaldo. It can just be a great thing for you in terms of keeping your mind active and learning all of those lessons that we talked about earlier. So getting a career out of it doesn't have to be the end goal.
Yeah.
And I think for probably 99% of the population wouldn't be. It's just about having a good time.
Yeah.
So with that aside, looking into the career options for someone inside esports, there's the obvious one, which is the player. If you are the magic genetic mix of all of the things you need to be amazing at esports, as well as you have the drive and the emotional maturity to be successful, then you could potentially be looking at 6-figure, 7-figure salaries to compete across the world. So that's the dream.
Wow.
If you don't make it that far, what else is there? So within the player sphere, and there's two industries here. I'm going to talk about sort of the player sphere and then the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So within the player sphere, you've got your coach, which is another thing that some players revert back to, who are almost go to that top level, but don't quite get there. They might decide to go into coaching top teams. You've got your team managers, who are more the logistics side of things, making sure teams can get to tournaments. In terms of science and research, there's a lot of activity now in the space around nutritionists for esports. Professional teams will have their own independent nutritionists, their own independent sports psychologists, and then sleep scientists as well to help the team, be at their mental peak whenever they're competing and making sure they're living those healthy lifestyles, because you do need to be in top peak physical condition to be in top mental condition. Right. So that's kind of the player sphere side of things. Behind the scenes is where esports gets really interesting, because we're not just a sport. If you want to get involved with your local rugby club, you might go and volunteer to be an umpire. And that means going down to your club and watching the games and blowing the whistle. Whereas in esports, most of our competitions are broadcast to Twitch. And behind a broadcast, you've got your director, you've got your technical producer, you've got your admin, your referee still, who monitors the games and deals with any issues. You've got your camera observer or operator. You've got your commentator or casters. You've got your hosts, your interviewers. There's lots and lots of sort of a full production side behind it. And these jobs happen at a community level. So a few weeks ago, there was a really big Rocket League tournament down in Southland, and they had a couple of hundred kids show up, and they broadcast the whole thing to Twitch in the stadium. They had the chairs, the stands, the stage, everything set up, lighting, hosts, the whole 9 yards. And that was the equivalent of a regional sports match. And it had the full broadcast opportunity there. So there's lots and lots of different opportunities available in the space. And all of it's transferable. If you don't make it in esports, you can go work for NZME or TV1 and use those skills you learn in production and radio, in any of those sort of areas. And so there's quite a lot of interesting directly related career options. The more generic overview, though, is the digital literacy you learn from esports, I think, is that generally we're in a gaming space. We've got a vibrant game development community in New Zealand. But we also know that in schools, we measure very, very carefully numeracy and literacy. And the reason we do that is because we believe as a society that those two things are absolutely critical to operating in the real world. The other really critical thing to operating in the real world is using technology. And it's become so pivotal and crucial in every single role. It doesn't matter if you're going to be a construction worker or a fast food worker or a architect. You're on the computer all the time doing stuff, whether it's your calculations or your order forms, your quotes or anything. And we don't measure digital literacy. We don't measure digital competency. But one of the soft skills that you kind of gain through osmosis in esports or gaming is the ability to confidently use a computer. And I think that even that entry into that space means that most people who've participated in esports with no other benefit have an advantage of being comfortable and confident with technology.
Yeah. And okay, so you haven't been at esports for that long, but what's your plans over the next couple of years? What are you hoping to achieve, and what do you think you'll be able to achieve with esports?
It's a long list. And so on our website, we kind of have a published strategy plan over what our plans are over the next sort of 4 to 5 years. And those things are things that we've already talked about, such as our high performance pathways. We really hope to turn the E-Blacks into something that young New Zealanders can look up to and aspire to, and say, and also help their parents understand what they're doing. One of our primary, missions across everything is to help change the perception of the general public of what esports is, and help educate people that it's not just, gaming, that it's not just a sedentary activity you're doing sitting down at the computer, that it takes incredible focus and skill and practice and everything else that goes along with it. And so most of our core projects lead back to that kind of sentiment, helping drive those sort of missions. We want to make it be an inclusive space. We hope to have women's leagues. We hope to have over 30s, over 40s, a masters division that people can get involved with esports. Basically somewhere where people feel comfortable to find their tribe. Like, the number one reason people participate in esports in this country is for a sense of belonging. And we hope to really emphasize that and make it somewhere that anyone of any interest, whether you're a football nut, whether you're an F1 fanatic, whether you're into Star Wars, you can come to esports as a community and find your tribe there. And that's what we kind of hope to see esports become, is something that's kind of across everything, but links everyone together in a way that's meaningful. Our mission, our formal vision at the NZESF is to unite New Zealanders to each other and the world. And I think that's really what it's about, is making sure we've got that space. So we've got lots of stuff going on. I can name a big, long shopping list, but I'm sure everyone will get bored.
And so tell me, out of interest, what's the representation between male and female at the moment?
So in esports, it's not good. It's like 90-10. In gaming, it's about 52 to 48. Like, it's fairly a 50-50 split.
Right.
But
so
it's
what's
difficult.
the problem there?
It's hard for females to break into esports, especially when you look at how they're treated in a competitive environment. Like, inherently, there's a lot of toxic masculinity in the space, where you hear a female on voice chat. When you're playing, you get randomly matched for the team. You've got 3 other people with you to serve an objective, and people will hear a female voice and go, "Oh man, I've got a useless team player already," and they'll verbalize that. They don't know how to, and that's incredibly discouraging for females. It's really hard for them to break into the space, and so the way that we hope to solve it is to first and foremost educate males into how to act appropriately. And again, one of the differences between esports and gaming, we want people to understand that, we have a set of values that we deliver with esports, and that's one of them. And then 2 is to help really bring that opportunity up in the form of dedicated women's leagues, and to creating spaces where they feel safe and heard. We have a women's subcommittee that has been formed at the NZESF, full of some influential women in the space, and we'd love to make sure that they're across everything we do and that they're being represented in our area. And an example of this in the real world is that we have, for the first time ever, a women's Dota 2 team representing us, or hoping to represent us, at the Commonwealth Esports Championships in August. And so we're really proud of that all-female team.
Yeah, that's just amazing. I can't believe it when you're quoting those stats. So that's just an incredible drop-off, isn't it, from gaming to esports for females? Incredible.
It is, and it's really, really sad. There's fantastic female players out there, but you need the emotional resilience of an absolute saint to be able to break through in some of these industries. And it's no fault of their own, which is the saddest part about it. It's just the fact that you're dealing with some ill-informed or emotional people who don't know how to treat others in that space. And so we want to do our best to try and bring more awareness around it. But one of the ways that we can immediately help that is through our dedicated female leagues.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot on the go, and a lot that you're going to achieve. I want to ask a random question though, which is not related really, but your previous business. When I talked to you last, you were exiting out of that. I mean, not completely disconnecting, but you're exiting it out, leaving it to someone else to run day to day and focusing on that. What I want to know, Jonathan, is how good have you been at letting go?
You know, probably too good.
Oh, really?
To the detriment of the other business. Yeah, I was probably very optimistic in my ability to manage the transition, and in
Right.
reality, so we brought on some new staff. I had a really good plan set out for them to continue what we were working on,
Yeah.
and it didn't work out.
Right.
And for the first couple of weeks, even under the NZESF and working with NZIQ, there was a big adjustment of, you know, you feel like your mind's almost in this one space, and then there's this knee jerk to switch
Yeah.
worlds into
Yeah.
something else. And I got better at that. However, as time went on and all of these projects I talk about, you know, I speak, hopefully it comes across, I'm very passionate about this esports space, and I think we're doing some really great stuff, is that I started to become more and more engrossed in the esports world.
Yeah.
And so I started to almost neglect the nurturing that new process needed to grow in the other business.
Yeah.
And that was unsuccessful. And so we're still sort of, as a board member of the other business, we're still sort of trying to repair and figure things out to fill the gap that I left. So it has not been good.
Right. So, okay, that brings up something else too, which I have a view on, but I want to hear your opinion. Passion. How important is passion in successfully running a business?
Ooh. Let me think about that for just a minute.
Yeah.
For successfully running a business,
Yeah.
I
Or could
think
it be a
it's important.
detriment? Could it count against you if you're too passionate? I'm interested in your point of view.
I think potentially, but we'll ignore that edge case. I think that passion for running a business of your own, it's
Yeah.
incredibly important.
Yeah.
For if you have a dream or a vision to build something, you need to be, in my opinion, willing to drop the expectation of 9 to 5, show up,
Yeah.
work, leave no responsibility. And the
Yeah.
only real way to do that well is with passion. Do you need to be passionate about a career to be successful? I don't think so. I think you can work in pretty much any other company and be a really valuable asset to that company without
Yeah.
being passionate about the cause. But if
Yeah.
you want to run and start and grow a business, you absolutely need to be passionate about it.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, just interesting listening to you before, because I mean, obviously you are very passionate about esports, and I'm kind of thinking, I wonder, you know, with your other business, you know, whether you lost the passion for that, and if that's the case, yeah, how hard does that make it to continue on that involvement when you know you've moved on to something else that's really grabbing you?
I'm not sure if it's almost like that infatuation stage, you know, you got a new girlfriend and
Yeah.
you're all about it, everything, you know, everything's about that one thing. And I think
Yeah.
I'm definitely still absolutely infatuated with
Yeah.
esports. And while I'm on that high, it kind of makes everything else
Yeah.
a little bit low key, and
Yeah.
it fades away a little bit while I'm on that cloud. And I'm self-aware of that. Like I know that's the space that I'm in, and I'm probably not going to be there forever. But while I am
Yeah.
there, I'm going to make the most of it, and I'm going to
Yeah.
get a lot done. And you know, every single time I talk to one person about one project, so I'll be working with High Performance New Zealand or High Performance Sport New Zealand on the E-Blacks, and they'll say, "Man, this is a big job, you know, especially for a team as small as yourselves." And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, this is less than 5% of the rest of my scope. And so if only they knew what else was going on.
Yeah.
And the only way that we can manage doing this much is because of that passion that I have for it, and you know, that drive. And so we'll absolutely make the most of it while it's there. And then as it does start to fade, my intention with the esports federation was always to come on as a founding CEO. Originally, I was part of the board, and we were looking for a CEO to start this organization, and we were looking at, we had some very prominent CEOs in other New Zealand commercial businesses who were interested in taking the position. But I believed we needed someone who understood the space. And so my intention was to start the role, to be the startup guy, to put all the processes, to build everything. And then once we have a clear direction, then hand it off to someone to take the reins and build it to that next level. And so I'm sort of using this time as the creation stage to build out what this organization is. The passion is very important for that. But again, I think it's only for running the business. I don't think it's realistic to expect every single employee you hire to be as passionate about the business as you are. And if they are, maybe you've got a problem.
All right, Jonathan. Well, that's been awesome. I've really enjoyed catching up with you again. I guess just to finish off, I'll leave the floor to you. Anything any last comments you'd like to make in terms of your pitch for esports and why we should all be getting on board and really endorsing and encouraging its spread throughout the country and, in fact, throughout the world?
I think I've done a pretty good job so far. everyone listening who's got to this stage has probably heard all of my views. But I mean, in summary, I guess it's something new. It's something that's engaging kids, and it's a chance for us to really lead the way and guide them on a path that's going to benefit them into their futures. Whether we like it or not, the world has changed. The world is continuing to change, and we're going to see this infiltrate sport at all sorts of different levels, through VR and AR, the way that we engage with our jobs. And we're already, this conversation 5 years ago would have been, we do it in person. Interviews happen in studios. They don't happen online. And the world is changing. And this is a way to really get ahead of that and to engage with kids. I've had some really special opportunities, even in my short time with the NZESF, presenting to parents at events, and they stand up and they go, my son joined an esports club at his school and we had a fight about it. And, now that I understand what esports is, I'm so proud of him, and I wish I'd supported him earlier. And that's what it's about. It's just about allowing people to have an open mind, allowing parents to understand what their kids are doing and not make it a risk to be involved in esports. And there's so many positives and benefits based around it. And we're not asking kids to stay inside all day and lock themselves in their room. It's actually the opposite. We're asking them to do it responsibly and to make it valuable. And so we're excited with where it's going. And we hope that everyone who is involved in this world, if my future children ever said, hey, Dad, I want to join an esports league, I'd be 100% behind them the whole way. And I hope that a lot of New Zealanders would share the same view in the near future.
Yeah. All right, Jonathan, well, thank you very much for your time. It's been awesome to catch up again, and I'm looking forward to all the incredible things you're going to achieve in the next year. No pressure.
Fantastic. Appreciate that.